I have never used any form of illicit substance. I'm just not interested. I've never used marijuana. I do use alcohol. I don't recommend that our young people do that either. Of course, it is against the law, but even if it weren't, this is something that they want to look into, to be careful what they put into their bodies. But in lots of ways, the worst, the most harmful thing about marijuana, for example, is jail. People don't realize, young people particularly, that if they are convicted, at least in California, of any marijuana offense at all, they probably will lose their student loans, their student benefits from government funding. You could be convicted of robbery, rape, or murder and not lose your student funding. Convicted of a marijuana offense, you could. Same thing with regard to your driver's license. Now, what's the connection? Because, for example, you can lose your driver's license if you're under 21 by smoking marijuana, even if the offense has nothing to do with driving. And the answer to that is really straightforward. The Congress, the legislature, the government takes ever more radical steps to try to make the square peg fit into the round hole, because the threat of jail wasn't enough to keep people from using marijuana. So they make it worse. So they attack your student loans. So they attack your driver's license in a more radical attempt to try to make this unworkable law be successful. And of course they never will. It's the same thing with government housing, that there are cases, in fact a United States Supreme Court case out of Oakland, that says that some grandparents who took in their grandson because the parents were not doing a good job, and they took their grandson in to live with them, he was convicted of having used marijuana 2 blocks away from their house. And as a result of that, they took away the government-subsidized housing for the grandparents. And even the judge at the time that occurred said, you know, there's no question that you didn't know he was doing this. Your only crime really was being too generous to your grandson. But even so, it's a more radical thing to take away the government housing because the regular criminal justice laws just do not work. We have seen this with regard to mandatory minimum sentencing. At the beginning, narcotics, bad thing, evil thing, etc., horrified, so the laws weren't working. So those liberal judges or whatever weren't putting people in jail. Of course they weren't, because it wasn't appropriate. But then Congress steps in. So before, okay, there was a conviction, but now we'll make it a mandatory 5 years in prison. And then thought, oh, well, now we've resolved the problem. And of course, they'd look at themselves 3 or 4 years later, after this was employed, and they say, gee, we have a lot more people in jail and prison now, but the situation's not better. Let's make it 10 years. Let's make it 15. Let's make it life. You can talk about a death penalty if you want to. It won't make any difference. And in fact, all it really does is scare off the lower level drug dealers and makes more of a profit motive for the big time drug dealers, because we cannot stop people from taking even sizable criminal justice risks, from making large amounts of money by selling small amounts of drugs. There will always be people that will take that risk. Those are problems that we are facing today. In fact, let me talk about the reason why we still have this failed and hopeless policy of drug prohibition in our country. Because pretty much everyone realizes all across the climate that what we're doing isn't working, but we're going to perpetuate it. We're going to continue with this failed policy to protect our children. I don't want my kids to be involved with drug usage, so we're going to continue this failed policy of the war on drugs. The problem with that is we are actually affirmatively putting our children in harm's way for 2 very serious reasons. The first is, it is easier for our young people to get marijuana or any other drug if they want to, that's the key, than it is a 6-pack of beer. Why is that? Because the alcohol is regulated and controlled by the government, and the illegal drugs are controlled by illegal drug dealers, and they don't ask for ID. So as a result, if our young people want to get any of these drugs, they can. It's easier than alcohol. Now, can our children get alcohol? Yes, we all know they can, but at least it's more difficult than it is any of these other drugs. Ask the question. How many of you young people have ever had someone offer you a free sample of marijuana or methamphetamine, ecstasy, whatever, on your high school campus? And a lot of them will raise their hands. How many of you ever had somebody offer you a free sample of Budweiser beer or Jim Beam bourbon on your high school campus? And of course it isn't done. Why? Because the manufacturers are regulated and controlled, and they know full well that they'll get severely punished, as well they should be, for doing such a thing. So it's easier for them to get the illegal drugs, if they want to. I ask kids, if I were to give you, ask classes of kids, if I were to give you each $50 in cash right this minute, how many of you could come back tomorrow at noon with $50 worth of marijuana if you wanted to? And 2/3 of the class will raise their hands, and the other third just could, but they just haven't thought about it. So that's the problem that we're facing. It's all caused by the policy of drug prohibition. The second reason why we're putting our children in harm's way, and I've seen this in juvenile court time and time again. Ask yourself a question. How much risk-taking can an adult drug dealer buy for $50 in cash from a 15 or 16-year-old boy in the inner city or anywhere else? And the answer is quite a bit. Now, $50 in cash is chump change for an adult drug dealer, but it's a lot of money for a kid. As a result, you have all of these drug dealers recruiting as many kids as they want to help them in their enterprise for selling illegal drugs. And they use them as gophers, they use them as lookouts, couriers, whatever it might be. Then, as night follows day, as soon as the reliability of our young people is established, the adult drug dealers trust them to go out and sell small amounts of drugs in the communities. Why would they do such an awful thing? The answer to that, of course, is easy. More money for the kid, more money for the adult. Ask yourself this question, which I do all of the time. If you have a 15, 16-year-old boy or girl selling drugs in his or her community, who is he or she going to sell to? People like me? No, they're going to sell to their 14, 15, 16-year-old peers, thus recruiting more children to a lifestyle of drug usage and drug selling, and it's all caused by our laws of drug prohibition. And that is why, as a judge, as someone who does not want our children to get roped into this lifestyle, we must change away from this failed policy. And I am doing everything I can to communicate those pieces of information to our people. Another example. For a long time, I was on the abused and neglected children calendar in juvenile court. And I would have maybe every 4 or 5 weeks the following scenario come into my own courtroom. I would have, let's call her a single mother of 2 kids, make a real serious mistake. Namely, she'd hook up with the wrong boyfriend, and the boyfriend would be selling narcotics. Okay, one fine day, he would come to her and say, "Tell you what, Sarah, if you take this package across town and give it to Charlie, I'll pay you $500. So she'd basically know it contained narcotics, but $500 is a lot of money. It helps me pay half my month's rent for the upcoming month. So she would do it. So she would get arrested, charged, and convicted of transportation of, let's say, 3 ounces of heroin across town. So she would get a sentence of 5 years in prison, which, to be honest with you, in today's world, that is not an unreasonable sentence for the transportation of 3 ounces of cocaine. Let me ask you a question. When the mother is incarcerated, what happens to her children? And the answer to that question is easy. She has legally abandoned her children. So unless she's really lucky and either has a close personal friend that's both willing and able to take custody of her children, they're probably going to be adopted by somebody else by the time she gets out of prison. So I tell her that. I look at her and tell her, of course, what she already knows. Functionally, you're not going to be a part of your children's lives for the next 5 years. And she starts to well up with tears. Wouldn't you? But then I tell her the brutal truth, which is, unless you're really lucky and either have a close personal friend or family member that's both willing and able to take custody of your children, again, they're probably going to be adopted by somebody else. And she starts to break down. Wouldn't you? But in my county, a lot of people are not affected by that human type of story. But I can get them to break down as well if they're taxpayers, because you know what's going to be happening to the taxpayer in the next year? Each child is going to be in a group home. It costs taxpayers about $5,000 per month per child to keep them in a group home. So now that's $60,000 of taxpayer money for one child times 2 children is $120,000 plus an additional $25,000 to keep the mother incarcerated. It'll cost us taxpayers something in the order of $145,000 of our tax money physically to separate a mother from her children. for no good purpose whatsoever. And it's all caused by drug money. It's caused by our policy of drug prohibition. And this is something that's downright stupid and harmful. So these, again, are parts of the reasons why I, as a fairly conservative Superior Court judge in a fairly conservative county in Orange County, California, speaks as publicly as I can, trying to change away from this failed and hopeless policy of drug prohibition.